My name is Nikki Goshen. I'm the Director of Professional Development with Journeys in Film, and I noticed off in our group chat that we have some people joining us from NASA as well, so that's extremely exciting. I'm originally from Cleveland, and we have the NASA Glenn Research Center there. I also have 14 years experience as a language arts teacher at both middle and high school levels. So on the line with us today is Martine McDonald. She is the Director of Programs for Journeys in Film. So Martine, if you could say a few words.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's great to share my experience with film education and youth development. I'm going to be in the group chat with you as we dive into the curriculum review. So there's lots to cover.
Great. All right, so let's get started. Journeys in Film was created by Joanne Ash in 2003, and it harnesses the storytelling power of film through innovative and interdisciplinary curriculum, which uses film as an intellectual framework for teaching core academics and increasing the global awareness of our students. So our comprehensive curriculum guides use results-based methodologies, which support various learning styles. They promote literacy, transport students around the globe, and foster learning that meets core academic objectives. So Journeys in Film selects films that encourage our youth to really develop a global understanding of themes, broad cultural significance, which includes human rights, inclusion, poverty, environmental issues, health and gender, and we develop interdisciplinary curriculum and discussion guides and provide customized professional development on the use of film to engage students while still reinforcing the skills in reading and writing, math, science, social studies, and the arts. You can learn more about Joanne, all about Journeys in Film and her vision on our website at journeysinfilm.org. All of our curriculum guides and discussion guides are available to download for free, along with many other complementary resources for teaching social awareness and global competency through film. We also encourage you to continue the journey with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We have our hashtag #TeachWithFilm. All right, so our first poll question for you asks, why teach with film? With young adults connected 24/7 to technology, using film in the classroom can help motivate students, particularly those who may be hard to reach, to move beyond engrossing movie narratives towards a deeper learning. So let's please take a moment to respond to our poll question. With which frequency have you used film in the classroom to teach content and curriculum?
We have such a group from all across the country. It'll be great to hear what you're watching and how often.
So we have our options here that are often, sometimes, or never. Let's go ahead and take a look at our results here. So often and never are in there, interesting, and then, the sometimes. So that seems about right. Thank you all for sharing. Off in our group chat, if we could just take a minute to discuss some of the films which you have used, how you've used them in the classroom for those of you who have, and what your experiences have been. If you have not used them in the classroom, what might you be looking for with using film in the classroom?
Especially what has been most engaging, what's the film you return to year after year. We love hearing that passion and curiosity for the stories that we need to be drawn to. So we have Laura, who shares that every movie she shares. She works in elementary school. October Sky is a great resource for physics. Amazing performances as well.
When we build rockets, exactly.
So throughout the session today, please keep sharing, and we'll keep sharing those out. All Quiet on the Western Front, also great. Facing the Giants and Coach Carter. So a couple of people talking about using October Sky, and that it's a perfect blend in terms of talking about hidden figures today in science. Aquila and the Bee.
Fantastic. Aquila. All right. So now we want to take a look at, you know, why using journeys in film, and specifically Hidden Figures. The ideal scenario for teaching specifically with Hidden Figures would be a team approach where, if applicable, say an entire grade would watch the film together, and then each core teacher, math, science, social studies, language arts, would go off and teach particular lessons aligned to their standards and benchmarks. And although this approach creates a shared sense of community in the school climate, we're fully aware of the restrictions that educators may face. So therefore, we encourage teachers to use our curriculum guides based on your individual needs. Obviously, there's going to be some things you'll use, some you won't, but we're used to that as educators of kind of picking and choosing what's best for us. So using Journeys in Film specifically, our organization commissions teams of top-notch educational experts and subject area specialists and editors to develop really high-quality interdisciplinary curricula for teaching core academic subjects. All of our guides use a unified design process, which includes enduring understanding statements, essential questions, notes to teachers, and both formative and summative assessment tools and rubrics. The Notes to Teachers section provides essential background information on the lesson, so the teachers may prepare for culturally sensitive material, as well as a means for accessing additional materials and activities. Great, so how are our lessons structured? Our lessons begin by focusing on enduring understanding, the main ideas of the lesson, and essential questions. So today we're going to review the overall curriculum guide structure while breaking down lesson 3, which is moving to the front of the bus, segregation and civil rights movement, which can be taught as a collaboration between both language arts and social studies teachers. All right, and did we want to mention anything in our group chats while we've been going off there? Are we good to go on to the next one?
We have some great film choices, definitely a lot of social engagement stories. So Hidden Figures, Tuskegee Airmen, The Great Debater, all stories that relate to the civil rights and integration narratives. Frozen River, in terms of talking about classism, sexism, and racism. So really the emphasis on intersectional representation while addressing subject areas. So we're all on the same wavelength. We have a great audience today.
All right, fantastic. Our next poll question just is simply, have you seen the movie Hidden Figures? So if we could take a moment to respond to our poll question, and we can get an idea of how many of us have seen that. Go to that one. All right, so 77% of us have seen this.
Oh, wonderful.
Fantastic. If we could use the group chat for a moment to discuss what you remember most about the film or how you might use this film in the classroom.
So how have you, I mean, with this question specifically, some of you might have viewed it on your own but not used it in your classroom. So please share if there's a distinction there. In addition to our lessons, which we'll go over, a lot of teachers write to us about how they've added their own resources and added on to a lesson. So we love hearing that as well.
Definitely. And I do love seeing a lot of movies that are being talked about in the group chat relating also to debate.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that. All right. So before, correct. I agree, Laura. Before we get started, we're going to take a quick look at the quote from Theodore Alfie, who is the director. So if you could just take a moment to read this.
I always love highlighting Hidden Figures blurs gender, race, and professional lines. I knew this was a part of history that had to be told. 55 years later, Hidden Figures is a rich and moving true story that deserves a spot in our collective consciousness. The backdrop for the movie is one of the most defining, complex periods in American history. The high-stakes Cold War, the space race, the Jim Crow South, and the birth of the civil rights movement. Exploring these historic events serves as a reminder that we must learn from our past experiences while continuing to catapult ourselves forward.
Correct. Thank you. So director Theodore Melf's passion for telling the story of NASA's so-called human computers, coupled with his vision for familiarizing young girls to the importance of STEM as a viable career choice, was the driving force behind him bringing to screen the story of one of the most complex periods in American history. So you can prepare your students to view the film by framing a context for the portrayal of the system of American segregation and the civil rights movement. Explain that while the real people, Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan and Mary Jackson, lived with the experiences of systematic racism, filmmakers often take creative license with real life events. And this may be a time to discuss point of view from the screenwriter, the director, and actors, as they all have a hand in forming their own interpretation of history based on their own biases in the research of historical documents. So we are going to now watch the trailer for Hidden Figures. Please pay special attention to the spoken words of the actors, and we'll be discussing the importance of these as we lead into the lesson.
Y'all gonna end up unemployed riding around in this pile of junk.
You're welcome to walk the 16 miles or sit in the back of the bus.
You have identification on it?
NASA, sir.
NASA? I had no idea they hired.
There are quite a few women working in the space program.
Least I can do is give y'all an escort.
3 Negro women are chasing a white police officer down the highway in 1961. That is a God-ordained miracle.
In 14 days, astronauts will be here for training. And we're shooting a human into space, and it's never been done before.
With the launch of the Russian spy satellite, the president is demanding an immediate response.
Running from the man.
Space Test Group needs a computer.
Catherine's the gal for that. She can handle any numbers you put in front of her.
You and I are different from each other.
This is about inventing the math, because without it, we're not going anywhere.
Yes, sir. That's John Glenn.
What do you guys do for NASA?
Calculate your launch and landing site. How could you be ogling these white men?
It's equal rights. I have the right to see fine in every color.
Oh, left, found it.
If you were a white male, would you wish to be an engineer?
I wouldn't have to. I'd already be one.
Yes, it's an uphill battle.
Get it, girl.
But guess who else is playing?
I don't know if I can keep up in that room.
Just make that pencil move as fast as your mind does.
You've been gone for 300 hours.
Felt like it to me, too.
Colonel Glenn launches in a few weeks. We don't have the math figured out yet.
There's no protocol for women attending.
There's no protocol for a man circling the Earth either, sir.
Every time we have a chance to get ahead, they move the finish line.
I need to be in that room hearing what you hear.
Within these walls, who makes the rules?
You, sir, you are the boss. You just have to act like one, sir.
We have liftoff.
We all get there together, we don't get there at all. In the fight of our lives, people.
My gals are ready. We can do the work.
More than 50 million Americans watching.
I got a warning light. Go find Catherine.
Colonel Glenn?
There's a real fireball outside. It's getting a little hot in here.
Yes, Jacqueline, I agree. One of the best films ever. And Laverne, also in our group chat, you can see, right, we just do not want to allow others to define us. So looking at the quotes for discussion, we had some music cues, some lyrical choices, the scripts. They convey how Catherine was viewed by her peers and the various struggles that these so-called human computer teams experienced while addressing the Cold War, the race to space, and the tension of systematic discrimination as Black women working at NASA. So let's take a look at the second quote that we have here. In the trailer, the officer expresses surprise about having people who look like Dorothy and Catherine and Mary at NASA. So what do you hear underlying in this? There are quite a few women working in the space program. How would you explain the implicit bias in Dorothy's reply to that? We're looking the history of the civil rights, the women's rights, and social issues. Excellent in so many. Absolutely, Hannah. And if we have some others,
it's such a strong script. So many stand out.
correct. And looking at
And
all of these.
We have Eileen Mattingly, our Director of Education here, and she is right in reminding everyone in the group chat that there are lessons for all of these subject areas in the curriculum guides. We might just dive into a few, but they're all available.
Exactly. And looking at film literacy is lesson 7, so we can look at point of view as well from we were discussing about the directorial perspective as well. All right, moving to the front of the bus. Lesson 3 focuses on the strong patterns of segregation that had persisted from the end of Reconstruction into the mid-20th century in the South, and with the efforts to resist them. This lesson can easily be taught as across both the language arts and the social studies curriculum. We begin each of our slides, or each of our lessons, with enduring understanding. And these are statements that summarize the important ideas and the core processes that are central to a discipline. And they have a lasting value beyond the classroom. They synthesize what the students should understand, not just know or do, as a result of studying this particular content area. And moreover, these enduring understandings, they articulate what students should revisit over the course of their lifetimes in relationship to the content area. They frame big ideas and they give meaning and lasting importance to discrete curriculum elements such as facts and skills. And they really help students who may struggle to gain understanding of the conceptions that are there. And they're usually framed as declarative sentences. So let's take a look at the last statement. The struggle for civil rights continues to be at the forefront of America's political and social landscape. How might that be applicable to the lives of our students today? So please respond in the group chat. If you could take a moment and talk about that last one, the struggle for civil rights. How does these affect your students in the classroom? Or if there's anything I missed in group chat, please, Martine, feel free to discuss.
Yeah, we had Shelley bring up the point that, of course, the officer earlier didn't know that there were so many African Americans or Negroes of that time period language at NASA. So that's something that came up for them. And also looking at the expectations others place on us versus our own expectations, which also, I think, relates to our current experience of civil rights.
Correct. And using film in the classroom to be able to bring about these really strong discussions in the classroom and help them understand the theme of the lessons is a great way to move forward with that. And the lives of our students today. The next part of our curriculum guides also include essential questions. Okay, I'm sorry, Jacqueline, I want to go ahead and I want to really try to comment on what's here. Absolutely. We have a lot of students who are dealing with undocumented parents and really struggling to understand how that's working in their lives right now. Many of them that benefit, absolutely.
And so we have a couple people saying they would benefit with more knowledge, and also that Black Lives Matter is more of a contemporary cause today. So a lot of young people are also involved in those conversations, and there's definitely parallel resources that come up in the next lesson actually around contemporary resistance.
Yeah, so each lesson is designed to encompass essential questions, which the students will come back to throughout the lesson. So we'll be looking at those. We're going to take a closer look at the second question. How do acts of resistance continue to affect American society, policies, and culture? If you could please, again, use group chat, we could discuss some of the current headlines that relate to this and how we could bring that in. Because I know that we've talked here with the women's marches, of course, undocumented and Black lives. Go ahead, Martine.
Oh, yes. So students are very aware of the women's marches and undocumented students and Black Lives Matter. Also, we want to acknowledge that yesterday was the national walkout, and many of your students might have participated So it's definitely something that might come up in terms of emerging headlines. Then we have, Sunita mentioned that, yes, and that of course race was a factor in this film, but really addressing the role of women at NASA. And so our work as educators is also looking at the intersectional experience, both historically speaking and also in contemporary narratives of what is it like to be a woman, what is it like to be a Black woman, what does it mean for your students to be undocumented, and have all of these different intersections, and it's a really rich discussion.
Very much so. And the student marches, if any of your students or your schools were involved in those, feel free to bring that up in the group chat, and we can absolutely bring that into the lesson as well. I'm looking at the duration of our curriculum guides. Are designed to give educators suggestions how long each lesson could take, as well as suggested materials for the lesson. And then, as with all of our curriculum guides, these can be used at your discretion based on what it is that you need. It's broke down into the handouts that we'll be using for this particular lesson, and we'll get into these more in depthly in a moment. Great points. All right, fantastic. Looking at our first one, we're now looking at handout 1. This is an interactive guide. It's suggested that students understand the Jim Crow era, who and what was Jim Crow as a pre-activity. And again, I know we have some who are in elementary school teachers right now that are with us, and this may be a little bit too advanced for that grade level. So we want to, there's information in the guide, the curriculum guide, that directs students to the Jim Crow Online Museum, where they will research information on the minstrel acts of the 1830s and 40s, as well as the inception of the Jim Crow laws following the American Civil War, which legalized segregation from the 1870s through the 1960s. So our curriculum guide encourages you to have a serious discussion on the history of racism in America with your students prior to sending them to the website, as some of the images and information could be shocking, somewhat even disturbing. We want you to be fully aware that the material may be too sensitive for some grade levels, so it's suggested that you review it and alter the lessons for your needs. We also include discussion rubrics, which have scoring based on listening, speaking, and depth of thought. In addition, we have this interactive worksheet, which Journeys in Film provides in all of its guides. Students are able to enter information directly into the online platform, or you may print the handouts out if you prefer that. Although it is suggested that students do this exercise for homework, it's always important to take into account the access to technology that your students may or may not have either at home or in the classroom. So lessons can and should be altered based on these factors. And as you can see here, we're also introducing the foundation for a cause and effect essay, which then can be used in multiple subject areas.
I just want to highlight that Rebecca or Shelley said that students could benefit from learning more about the Civil Rights era, and that this contemporary aligned worksheet is really helpful. So thank you. Well, thank you for being here.
Yep. Thanks. Handout 1 also has educators, we have for you the teacher resource page with possible responses, because who doesn't appreciate having this information prior to a lesson? So suggested answers are provided in there to kind of help, especially if it's your first time going through the lesson with your students. In addition, Journeys in Film provides the rubric for scoring based on completion, comprehension, and accuracy. And those are all there for you as well. All right. So we don't want to go right into that, is my apologies. All right, lesson 3, it includes a research activity where the students are going to research acts of resistance during the civil rights era. So going back to what Rebecca was talking about earlier and what many of you are speaking of, we can look at those and then also do those in comparison to what's happening today. In Hampton, Virginia in 1961, segregation of public spaces was still an active practice. So even with court orders, civil rights activists working diligently, the community culture remained largely unchanged. The workplaces, especially in the sciences, were dominated by men. And watching the clip of the library scene of Dorothy Vaughan may be a good way to lead students into these elements of segregation during that time. So we're now going to watch the clip, and afterwards we can discuss how the visual images in the film convey the restrictions that people face during this time. And we do want to keep in mind that this is a lesson on teaching film in the classroom. So we ask students when we're reading to develop those visual images based on the written word, and now we're kind of flipping that to be able to identify the visual images on the screen. So we'll go ahead and watch the library scene. Thank you.
We don't want any trouble in here.
Oh, I'm not here for any trouble, ma'am.
What are you here for?
A book.
You have books in the colored section?
It doesn't have what I'm looking for.
Well, that's just the way it is.
So now, you know better than
Get
this.
your hands off my boys. Don't touch them.
You have a blessed day.
Separate and equal are two different things. Just cause it's the way doesn't make it right. Understand?
Yes, Mama.
You act right, you are right. That's for certain. Understand?
Yes, Mama.
You took that book, Mama?
Son, I pay taxes. And taxes pay for everything in that library. You can't take something you already paid for. Fortran is a new and exciting language used by programmers to communicate with computers. It is exciting as it is the wave of the future.
All right, so thank you.
So there's really strong imagery in that scene.
Very, very much strong imagery in that scene. Would eyes on the prize be good for expanding? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
That is a great resource, actually. It's an amazing documentary movement. That is an option. If you had more time and you wanted to include more film, we'd love that. And Eileen also agrees. Hi, Eileen. So we, I know that we head into handout 2. Please keep going with the group chat. But we like to debrief the films at times. We don't have quite enough time to do that. But the striking image for me there is the constraints of the frame of literally talking through a barrier, through a library shelf, and looking at the isolation the characters might feel. So that might be something you would bring up in your classroom.
Absolutely. And we discussed also, how do you feel about Ms. Vaughn taking the book from the library? What are some of the issues that we have seen with that, and how would we bring that up? All right, fantastic. So looking at handout 2, the way that the curriculum guides are aligned, we, for the research aspect of lesson 3, it's suggested that students be divided into groups of 5 to research and report upon the following topics that are listed here. Prior to the lesson, the students should review the differences between primary and secondary sources. While the social studies teacher is reviewing the historical content of these topics, the language arts teacher can guide the students through the pre-writing, writing, and editing aspects of the lesson. And if we do have any language arts and or social studies teachers here, or any other teachers of different content areas who have collaborated across the curriculum to teach, could anybody please feel free to talk about what's worked and what has not worked, and we'll be discussing that towards the end of this as well. We've lost sound.
I also want to acknowledge a few people are having technical difficulties. Marjorie or someone from Share My Lesson might be able to pop into the group chat and we can talk about it.
Okay.
So feel free to keep going.
All right. So when we're looking here at the handout 2, to get into researching the acts of resistance, we also have another student interactive guide, allowing students to transfer their research directly into the guide, or also they can be printed. These also include the detailed teacher resource pages in the activities, so that gives educators an overview of the main ideas that the students should be pulling from their lesson. All right, and so we want to give everyone a moment just to kind of refresh their browsers, make sure that we're not having any issues with the sound. Okay, we also have our final assessments and looking at how the students may present their findings. Obviously, we can do this in a myriad of ways. However, Journeys in Film has designed a rubric that's centered around a PowerPoint or a poster presentation, which includes scoring based on creativity, comprehension, and depth of thought. Our extension activities are, oh, hello? Is everyone there? Okay.
Yes.
Our extension activities provide educators with activities that we can do. Contemporary examples of resistance to social justice are continuous. So our curriculum guides provide links to events that have taken place over the past few years. However, we encourage you to research current examples in the media, much of which we have talked about today. I don't have cross-curricular. I really want to, watching these. Great, Rebecca. I love to hear that you guys are getting some ideas, and if you want to talk about those, we can. That's obviously the point. We want to be able to really utilize the group chat to get some of the ideas about how we really can cross-curriculum and work on that in the classroom. So as I stated earlier in the presentation, Hidden Figures is best taught as a team approach, which can promote true interdisciplinary learning. However, most teachers still choose the particular lesson that fits their own needs rather than attempting to do it all. So we were able to look closely at lesson 3. However, I'd like to take a moment to summarize some of the other 7 lessons that are in this guide. So we're looking also at space exploration and looking at space exploration, entering a new modern era. I think we all were in awe of watching, the SpaceX taking off and what is happening. It's fitting to look back at the inception of the United States space program and launching our astronauts into space. So lesson 1, you download our curriculum guides, is a social studies-based lesson that teaches students about the Cold War and then the competitive effects of those at NASA. There's a great lesson that can be taught to kind of teach competition in the classroom. Lesson 2 combines social studies with science and language arts, and it's a lesson on Sputnik and the origins of NASA. Lesson 4 is a viewer response activity for language arts, and then that gets into the general language arts topics where we analyze character development and themes. For those of you who have been patiently waiting for our STEM lessons, you'll find those in lesson 5. And that's where students can study scientific notation, understand the trajectories that are calculated in the film, and then the physics of an object in motion. We use GlowScript, which is a coding software. So there are math lessons, oh yes, on the conic sections and the orbits. Thank you, Eileen. So that is great. All right, lesson 7 focuses on film literacy. And some of the ideas that we see in film literacy is really to look at a glossary of film and to understand how film terms kind of help with the story and looking at backstory or camera angles, camera movements even. And that also goes into passive viewing versus active viewing. We don't want a student watching a movie and just saying, I liked it, I didn't like it, and those things. So how can we really motivate students to be active or passive viewers? And we may have time for this as well, go in a little more in-depthly. Lesson 8 is to motivate our students to learn more about the history of women in science. And there's a research activity where students go and research women who have done incredible things in the field of science and technology, and then some of the opportunities that are available for them today. looking at our question and answers, we want to know a little bit about how you feel using hidden figures to teach students about visual storytelling and the civil rights era. So we're looking at so many of the themes and the backgrounds from that, but in addition to teaching a story in a visual level, and also how do you feel about collaborating with teachers in multiple subject areas to teach a unit on hidden figures?
I'm just following up on our... yes, I'm sorry. I'm answering your wonderful questions you've left us. No, those are the main points that you know, when you look at how you want to integrate this content, you can dive in from so many different angles. I also briefly lost my screen, so I want to make sure I get back to you all. But Nikki, please keep going.
Okay, and I see Rebecca too, the idea of comparing different types of camera shots as aspects of writing, a group shot dialogue, and absolutely. So when we look at some of the aspects of film, what is it that we're seeing in a film that may affect how the audience is interpreting there? So by absolutely having the directors bring in a shot for that specific reason, you know, it's a narrative, and we're looking at all of those, but the camera angles, it could show strength of a subject. If it's looking down, maybe it's showing weakness of it. So even just looking at the different camera angles, even the eye-level shot that's used, you know, what we've noticed in the library scene.
Marjorie, that's a great point about background details in a shot, because oftentimes there's peripheral details with the stage, the production design and everything else that impact an emotional resonance, and that's a great point. And we have a lot of people who are excited about teaching with film. That's what we love to hear. And also collaborating with each other, so that's great. And also I see that you all have been submitting questions in the Q&A box separately, so if I have not answered your question, we will get to that as well.
And what are some of the resistance, Kara, that you may find that's in there in the classroom? So when you're collaborating with peers, do you see this as an opportunity to possibly watch the movie together?
So Eileen, our Director of Education, is wonderfully sharing that, of course, many of our curriculum guides do have the film literacy lessons that Nikki covered, and also analyzing the directorial decisions overall. We also have Kirsten sharing that she's created many film-based lessons over the years, and they're well worth subject crossover time, especially a history curriculum, a literature course, arts courses. So subject areas Christopher is bringing up that you wouldn't normally get the chance to work with. So if you're having resistance, it sounds like I love that you all are supporting each other in the group chat around how to address how valuable this is with your administration or with your students or families.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I taught middle school for a little while. We had teams. It wasn't necessarily the same structure at the high school, obviously, but with the team structure, it's really great to be able to take a look at the movie, and that way the entire climate is working, the entire school climate is working towards the same themes or the same ideas in the same movies, and it just creates a really cool sense of community around the school. Absolutely, Eileen. Definitely easier at the middle school, but can be done at the high school. All right, so I believe that our team back at Share My Lesson is going to facilitate some questions and answers for us right now.
Hi there, yes. This was a very exciting presentation, and I really appreciate the fact that you have shared all this with us. It's just, I want to go back to teaching now for the first time in 6 years, maybe. So I have this question from Kirsten. I teach in a once-a-week group and have 2 to 3 hours to cover a movie. That's lucky. A week's worth of homework is sent home with students as follow-up. Being a high school course, students have already learned about much of the background of history and culture. Your curriculum is 156 pages. How long do you estimate this full study to take in classroom time? Do you have a suggestion on what to cover to streamline the lessons?
Absolutely, and that's what we were talking about earlier. Obviously, you know, these are very extensive curriculum guides, and not everything in there is going to be applicable to your particular content area, nor is it going to be applicable to the time frame that you have. So we really just encourage you to read through them. They're easy to read, they're easily laid out, and then you can go through and determine what would be best for your individual needs.
Okay. Is there, okay, that's, it is a little of what can you use and what can you optimize, right? There is, Karen works as a perfect match for teaching civil rights era. I lived in rural Georgia during this time. Wow. I think you have asked the ones about collaborating, and would you consider using hidden figures to teach students about visual storytelling? When you were talking about the library scene, I would almost frame a question to my students about that, about the access to libraries, and frame it as a question of privilege, to get them to think about racism. It's just such a, there's so many cool things in this movie. Let me see. Is there a way I can do the polls for the certification? Yes, there is. You can go back and take the poll questions at the conclusion of this, I believe. Kelly, do you want to weigh in here, or Susan?
Yeah, the poll questions. You can come back and take the webinar at a later date. We'll be sending you an email after this concludes, about an hour later, and you can log back in and then take the poll questions at that point. From there. But I'm curious to, as long as I'm on the phone, I would love to just ask our speakers. You know, I mean, I am just a big fan. We're so excited to have you as partners on Share My Lesson. And you know, Hidden Figures is one of many films that you guys work on. I'm curious what's in the hopper and what you're working on now.
Yes, thank you for that, Kelly. We always love connecting with you all. Our latest releases include a discussion guide for National Geographic's The Race issue. But in addition to that, we have a really amazing curriculum guide coming out for National Geographic's One Strange Rock very soon, which is a 10-part series. We have Landfill Harmonic, which is an amazing documentary coming out next month. We have a new curriculum guide to go with Walden, a Game, which is a video game, our very first video game, focusing on exploring Henry David Thoreau's journey with Walden while you're walking through the actual game and experience of engaging with nature. So there's a lot. Our plate is very full, and we feel very happy to share it with everyone.
And just to reiterate what Martine had said about the One Strange Rocket, just like really, really, really amazing. The video game for Walden is set up so that it looks at the different seasons, and those of you who have taught the Transcendentalist unit, you know, going through the different seasons, it's a really cool interactive way for kids to look at Thoreau's story.
Mm-hmm. If anyone was watching,
familiar, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if anyone was watching National Geographic this week, we also had Jane premiere on National Geographic, and it's also available on iTunes, and there's a discussion guide for that as well. About Jane Goodall.
Okay. And if you go on to Journeys in Film, which we, again, encourage you to continue with us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can use the hashtag #TeachWithFilm. So that would be wonderful to continue the conversation there. We do have our curriculum guides, which we kind of looked at a little bit here today. We also have discussion guides that are a smaller level for some of the, a smaller guide for some of the movies that we have as well. Oh, and the post. Thank you, Eileen. We do have lessons that are coming out for the post. And again, yep, there is our information and our Teach with Film.
Yep.
So thank you. Marjorie, you were going to close this out?
Yes, yes. Thank you again, Nicole and Martine and Eileen and Journeys in Film for this really fabulous presentation. I cannot wait to look at the curriculum guide. Thanks to all the participants who logged on and chatted with us and sent questions. You're going to have a survey in just a second. We need this feedback, please. It's valuable for our speakers and for the program as we try to plan future webinars. Thank you again. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Nicole and Martine and Eileen, thank you, thank you, thank you.